Today, I want to talk about love and fear, love versus fear, and making the choice, and how actually making that choice can really change our lives. It's nothing new. Mystics, poets, teachers have been talking about this for millennia. But I think we're in a point in time where it's actually becoming more prevalent and more important. And I want to speak to the theme today, and it both can be seen collectively, but also personally, because doing the personal work, it's not about transcending or getting rid of your fear, but actually loving it. So you could say fear is a figment of the imagination. Love is really the only real thing. It really truly is, because I believe that who we are is love. And when this body dies, and you could say when all of this kind of crazy simulation is over, what do we return to? We return to love. So love is really the only true thing. And I have found for myself that when I make the choice to lean into love, even when in fear, even when in anxiety, even when in all of the challenges of being human, it is the ultimate alchemist. So that's what we're going to dive into today. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So if you've been following me over these years, you've heard me many times talk about this choice point that we've been at and these two very different pathways through life. One being the path of love and one being the path of fear. And I think it's just becoming more and more obvious. But I really want to speak to it today because I find as I'm going through my own personal journey right now that it's a reminder for me to keep coming back to, I kind of like the term, like, what would love do? What would heart do? So I have not slept for about 5 weeks. I've had insomnia, which I've just completely surrendered to now. I'm like, yeah, I wake up at my normal, 3 a.m. time, and I'm in transition, and my body is going to have a certain response to it, and all I can do is relax into it. But what's interesting observing it is I wake up sometimes calm, but sometimes with like a pang of fear or pang of anxiety because I'm stepping into a huge unknown. I continue to live out of a suitcase, and I'm really, really, truly in present moment living. Like, I leave tomorrow night. I have a place for the first 3 nights. I don't know where the next 3 nights are going to be. And then I have a month set up. So it's really this interesting kind of the part of me that wants to get scared and anxious and wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, where are you going to sleep those 3 nights? What are you going to do? And the fear and the anxiety and the worry and what it does to my body. And then there's this other part. It's similar to the story that I shared last week. The part of me that is really probably coming from the reptilian brain is wanting to have the freak out. And then the higher self, my soul self, that is like, it's okay. Don't worry. Trust. It's all going to be fine. It's all going to be okay. And I find myself being able to observe both happening simultaneously, which is very interesting. So when I speak about like fear, it's not to say, oh, fear is bad, get rid of it, ignore it. The visceralness of fear, it's very real, right? It can feel very real. However, the reason why I say fear is not real is because it truly is a figment of our imagination. Because when I'm lying in my bed, I'm safe, right? I have nothing to be afraid of. So it's not real in the moment as far as something is terrifying me. And I could even argue that even if something is terrifying us, like the bear, that would induce fear, right? But there's still a choice point in it. It's really interesting. Like a lot of these different techniques around I don't know the terms of them, but there's a lot of these different methods around, especially dealing with trauma and fear and anxiety. And it's really about creating an entirely different connotation. So if somebody has a phobia of something, you go in and you're switching the way that you relate to it. You're changing the neural pathways. You're literally reprogramming, because our mind is kind of like a software system. And we can change the programs. We can update the programs. It sounds so weird and cold and, computic. I don't know what the word is, but it's true. It's true. So we're very programmable, which is both bad and good. The good part is that we can reprogram it. So fear, in essence, isn't actually real. It's a figment of our imagination, and our imagination can go into all sorts of stories. But when you bring yourself into the present moment and you realize, well, right now, I'm okay. And also, probably in that future moment, I will also be okay as long as I stay present with my experience. I came across a post, a meme that said, no amount of anxiety over the future, or no amount of regret over the past will change our lives. Like, the only thing that will change our lives is gratitude for the present moment. I'm paraphrasing. I'm greatly paraphrasing, but it's something to that effect. And it's true. The anxiety and the fear that we have is often about something that could happen in the future. So, but coming back to this theme of these two paths of love and fear, if you haven't already noticed, it's a massive theme, basically, that's been very, very poignant since 2020. And I do personally come from the perspective that I think the society that we're living in, the culture, the people and organizations that are running this world, the way that they impart information, I see it all as incredibly fear-based. It's keeping people, humanity, in this fear loop. There is nothing positive when you listen to the news. There just isn't. That's not the point. I was actually, interestingly, listening to this podcast, this man being interviewed, who he's created a lot of different shows and episodic shows in Hollywood, and also some films. He's a medium himself, so he's very spiritual, he's very connected. And he was talking about how he was doing a reading through his mediumship on I don't know if it was on live air. I think it was on live air. And, he's in this very kind of authentic experience with this person that he's doing a reading for. And he catches off the sideline behind the camera the producer holding up a sign that says, "Make her cry now." And he said after the filming, he walked into the control room and he said, "Don't ever, ever do that again. This is not a false reality show." So I don't watch television, haven't had television in about 20 years. But this whole quote unquote reality shows, I don't think are reality at all, because I'm sure that behind the scenes they're doing that, like, make her cry right now, make him get angry, they're trying to create drama. And he was also saying that this show that he was writing, they kind of started off with like a little bit of a spooky element, but they wanted to end it also in this kind of fear-based energy. And he said, "No, I'm not going to write it. I'm not going to make it if I want to have a positive ending. I want to bring it into a place of beauty. I don't want to keep people in fear and in this drama and in this negativity." And so you see, like, that's influencing people all the time. And I think that's why there's really the need for discernment right now of, are you going to choose fear or are you going to choose love? Because, of course, there are terrible things happening in this world. Like, even if you shut off the news, and, there will always be an element of this dualistic realm, right? There's so much going on. I don't find that fear is ever the answer. Because from fear comes division, comes hatred, comes you versus me, us versus them. Fear, the energy of fear, is never actually going to be something that is going to bring us to a place of peace. It brings us to a greater sense of conflict and war, right? So love truly is the answer, even if someone has a differing opinion to you. Even if there are cruel, horrible, unjust things happening in the world, how is fear going to make it better, right? Fear perpetuates that karmic loop of feeling like a victim, feeling powerless, feeling at the mercy of, and it's not who we truly are, because the essence of who we truly are, the soul of who we are, is love. We are this magnificent, beautiful, powerful, creative, empathic, compassionate beings. And we're in the amnesia, and we've been kept in the amnesia, and now we're going through this incredible awakening, which is just actually remembering who we truly are. It's not remembering anything new. It's not finding anything new. It's remembering who we have always been. So for me, this choosing the path of love is really the only answer anyhow. And it's really just a returning home. And even amidst the struggle and the fear and the pain and all of that, love really is the only answer. So in the middle of the night when I wake up and I feel the fear and my mind goes into the, oh my God, what am I going to do? And how am I going to do that? And the stress and all the story that comes with it. I'm tired of doing this alone. I want support. I look at my, I didn't grow up with my father, so I didn't have the masculine figure. My mom sometimes has she's a self-pres in the Enneagram. And sometimes I feel like, I'm taking on her anxiety. All the story, right? There's so much story. And the story, thought triggers emotion, and emotion gets the body to think that it's in a certain reality. The body doesn't know the difference of what is real time and false time. So the imagination, I'm sure you've had that experience where you can imagine something and your body starts to have all these feelings, right? So again, very programmable, which is both bad and good. You can put yourself into a tizzy about something that hasn't even happened, or you can have these thoughts that actually create these beautiful emotions, and then you're creating that as your reality. So making the choice can literally change your life. It can literally change your life because it will paint it'll paint your reality. How do you want your reality to be? Now, again, I'm not into the whole spiritual bypassing and always be positive and negative, never be negative, and always have good thoughts and good feelings and don't ever be angry. And I don't believe in that. What I do believe in is when the discomfort arises, right? So let's not call them negative emotions. Let's call them uncomfortable emotions. When the uncomfortable emotions arise, be with them, sit with them, stay with them, love them, listen to them, alchemize them through your love. That's the only thing that ever changes anything. And I know you know that, because when you're feeling down, what do you crave? You crave comfort. What is comfort? Comfort is being held. What is being held? Being loved. Now, some people might go to food. They might go to TV. They might go to sex. They might go to drugs. But what are they actually all seeking? Love. Love is the one and only thing that makes us feel better. So on the world stage, choosing the path of love right now, while we're seeing all of this, war and destruction and division, is really the only way that we can, as individuals, change things, because we can't go out and personally stop a war, right? But we can change our frequency. We can change the way we show up, and that has a ripple effect. It's the butterfly effect, right? That the butterfly flaps its wings and it's felt on the other side of the universe. We do have more power in that sense. And I think we are waking up to the fact that we are energetic beings. It's all about frequency and vibration. And so that we actually do have control over. And what I mean by control over is, I don't mean the control that we've had such a poor example of, which is control equals power over others and greed and just torture, meanness, if I'm going to speak like playground talk. I I mean control over, we are in the driver's seat, not controlling out of fear, but fully engaged and fully embodied. And I just think from that perspective right now, we have a tremendous amount of control. Be love. Be the change. Choose wisely, right? What do we want to feed right now? If it's all just an energetic field, what do we want to feed? Now, if we want to change the macro, we have to change the micro. So if we want to change the world, we have to change our inner world, as within, so without, as above, so below. I think those are universal laws. So coming within us, as you've heard me talk for years now, if you've been following me, this isn't about getting rid of parts of your humanity. It's about embracing them, holding them, loving them, giving them the massive hug that they need. And just letting them know it's okay. I'm here for you. I love you. I'm not going to judge you. The world won't change. We won't change until we let go of judgment. Judgment also comes with fear. And I'm not here to vilify them. I'm here to recognize, to point out that yes, this is part of being human. This is part of the ego. This is part of our programming. But we get to change that. I think we're in a time that we don't have to play out the pain and the struggle and the suffering and the fear and the judgment and the anxiety. I think we've played that. Like, if this was a video game, like we've played that game, take it out, put another one in. I think the soul has learned enough through that. And we get to learn in other ways now. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth repeating. So making the choice between love and fear, let's say fear arises within your personal experience and you're feeling it very viscerally. It's not about getting rid of the fear and saying, no, I'm going to choose love and get rid of fear, right? I'm going to vilify fear and I'm going to stuff it away. Remember, there is no way. But it's sitting with it. It's sitting in the fire of the discomfort and then letting love be the container. Letting love be the part that guides you through the fear. What would love do? What would heart do? Okay, I feel afraid right now. I feel anxious right now. It's all a feeling, which might have been stemmed from a thought, but it's a feeling, and my body is experiencing that feeling, that sensation, that experience. It feels real, right? Because it's having the sensation. But instead of being guided by the fear, which will only lead me to make more choices out of fear, that's what I mean, where it keeps us in that quote unquote karmic cycle. What I mean by karmic cycle is just that it keeps us in that same loop, the same patterns, the same behaviors, the same choices, therefore the same cause and effect, right? And that keeps us in the victimhood and in everything that I've just said. So instead of being led by the fear, I'm walking the path of fear that is just going to replicate the same dynamic over and over and over again. I can be with the fear, with the sensation of the fear, but I let love be the guide. I let love steer me in a different direction, and love will never abandon. It will transmute and it will alchemize. It will never reject. It will never get rid of. It includes. And through the inclusion, it literally changes the molecules of that embodiment, identity, existence, experience, and turns it into love. That's why I believe love is the only thing that's left. Because it's the only true thing that is. Does that make sense? Like it literally is the makeup of all that is. Call it consciousness, call it energy, call it God, call it spirit, call it universe, call it the creator of all that is. Love is the point of all creation. That's it. So the most direct route, whatever we're going through, whatever we're moving through individually and collectively, the direct route is love. And love has the highest frequency, and the highest frequency in the end, quote unquote, wins. It just does. So it sounds so simple because it is, but as you've heard me say, the simplest things are the most profound. Not always easy, but the most profound. And to me, the most quote unquote true. I say quote unquote because words are limiting. Words have a lot of connotation, right? And how I might perceive a word might be different to how you perceive that word. So I'm very mindful of how words are used, because based on our connotation and how we personally define them can mean a totally different thing. So I'm not trying to be annoying with the quote unquote, but I'm putting it there knowing my definition might be different than your definition, and that's okay. But it's what it means to you. I go back to what I said last week. Life just is. Experience just is. What gives it meaning is our perception and our projection and our beliefs and just simply the meaning that we give it, right? And the great thing about that is that's malleable in a way. But I like to look at it as like sifting through, like if you were to take a sieve and you were to put sand, stones and all of it in, you're at the beach, right? And you shake it and all of it leaves you with just the kind of most important bits, right? The bits that can't get through, but there's a lot that can get through. All of the fine sand can get through the sieve. I think that's the process that we're in right now, is just sift through what you don't need. The simplification so that you're just left with the gems that are really the important parts of life. And your gems might be different to my gems, but I think the common gem is going to be love, because who doesn't want love? Who doesn't want to be in love? Who doesn't want to be surrounded by love? Who would want the world to be more loving? Now, the ego, which is what feeds into fear, because fear doesn't exist in the spirit realm. It just doesn't. Neither does duality, neither does judgment. So it's very much a figment of the imagination. It's of the mind and of the ego. And that's why fear is a very strong tactic to manipulate and brainwash and control people, because it's the one thing, I remember Darius Wright said, it's the one thing that can control the soul, because the soul actually isn't controllable, but it can give the illusion of controlling, because we forget the soul, we forget who we are, we forget that we're love, and then it can really control us. All you have to do is go back and look at 2020 and 2021. That was such a strong exemplification of look at what fear does to people. It makes people fight over toilet paper. It makes people go to war with each other. It makes people say the most terrible, mean, atrocious things online to someone else because they've forgotten who they are. They've forgotten who they are as a soul. They've forgotten heart. They've forgotten love. Because they are driven by such a state of fear. Fear will make us do crazy things. Crazy things. I don't say that with any judgment. I say that with compassion for like, wow, that's the challenge of being human. And so can we recognize that? Can we be awake to it? I think consciousness and walking the path of self-awareness and being fully awake is a beautiful thing. Like we're waking up to the fact of like, oh, right, my humanity does this. This human that I'm in right now does this. Okay. I don't need to reprimand it. I need to understand it so that I can be with it, so that I can love it and make good choices so that the tail isn't wagging the dog, that I'm not at the mercy, but I'm actually learning here and I'm allowing it, I'm using it as a tool for growth. Right? This is the school of life. Our soul comes here because it's very interesting, super dramatic sometimes, really tiring, but it's interesting. So instead of looking at it and vilifying it, vilifying being human, vilifying humanity, vilifying people when they show up super shitty, how do we learn from it and then be love, be the change? Don't fight with it. Hatred will not cease by hatred, right? As Gandhi said. So I think, we've seen what the last, those years, 2020, 21, 22, we've seen the ugly shadow side of fear and hatred and division, right? And I feel like actually more people are dropping into heart. There's still people that are going to follow that trajectory, They're going to go along that agenda and that pathway. Like, okay, that's what they're wanting to learn. That's okay. It's neither better or worse or right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, what experience do we want to have, though? And I think those that are wanting to, that feel called to bring people back into their heart and bring people back into love, it's helping humanity remember who we are. We're here to be of service. But that also comes with a responsibility, because if you see someone else in fear and you're like, they're in fear and they're doing this, that, and the other, you're going into the very thing that you're judging, you're becoming, right? And it's hard, folks. It's hard. But that's why practice with yourself. Notice, oh, I want to be a whole, loving, compassionate person. But are you judging your fear? Are you judging your jealousy? Are you judging your anxiety? Are you being mean to it? Are you rejecting it? Are you trying to get rid of it? Are you talking down to it? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, as within, so without. So if you want to be a loving, compassionate, understanding, empathic, kind person to others, you got to be really kind to all parts of who you are, of yourself, of your human, of your ego, of your mind, of your trauma, of your patterning, all of it. All of it. So no matter what situation or experience we're in, whether it be outside of us or inside of us, because there's no difference, we get to ask ourselves the question, what would love do? We get to lean into love. And it's not about becoming like delusional, it's not about like, oh, I'm going to just ignore what's happening. That's the spiritual bypassing. No, you sit in the fire and you ask, what would love do? And then it brings, as I spoke to so many times, but especially last week, it brings us back into when we drop from the mind into the heart, from fear into love. There's trust there. That's how we have trust. It's really hard to be trusting if we're in a state of fear and in a state of survival, because there's no creativity in that part of our brain. Right? How can you trust when you're just simply trying to survive? So even as like tomorrow I'm getting on the ferry, which gives me a bit of heebie-jeebies, sleeping on a ferry. I've never done it before. I swear to God, I probably sank with the Titanic in a past life. But, I'm going through that and still having to organize, for this coming next weekend where we're going to stay. And I feel the fear, I feel the anxiety, I wake up every night and, probably for numerous reasons. But what's fascinating is like, I do think we're coming into much more present moment living, because time is an illusion as well, right? All we have is the now. So yes, okay, we need to prepare, but I'm playing around. This is just a playground. I'm playing around with this part that's like, well, what if I were to really radically trust and just trust that like, it will come in. The right place will come in. Maybe it'll come in the day before. But what if I were to just crazily, radically trust that it's all going to be okay? And I don't have to worry. And I don't have to be afraid. And I don't have to be anxious. And that's true for whether I plan something a month in advance or a day in advance. But what would it be like to not do it with fear? What would it be like to not do it with anxiety? It's kind of fascinating, and it's something. I'm not saying go and do stupid things and be unrealistic. I'm not going to ever put myself or my child in a situation that's dangerous, right? But I think there's a whole lot of unnecessary fear, because the reality is, of course, we'll find a place. Of course we will. Like, we're not going to be homeless. But it's what I'm looking at is just what the mind does and how so much of it is unnecessary. So much of it is creating unnecessary suffering and panic and anxiety. And, sometimes it's easier to see that reflected back to us. So I was noticing how I woke up one morning and, I was saying to my mom, I have a little bit of stress about not knowing where we're going to be that weekend. And what I really would have loved as a response was, oh yeah, I get that. You're going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. You're going to figure it out. I would have loved that response. And the response that I got instead was, oh yeah, I'm really stressed about that too. I woke up and was really stressed about that too. So instead of being comforted, I got her anxiety on top of my anxiety. Now, I don't blame her because, she has her own fear. She has her own stress. She has her own anxiety. She's in that part of her being, right? And if you understand the Enneagram and you understand the instincts, the subtypes, you can understand how some types might gear more towards anxiety and stress and fear than other subtypes. So, I don't take it personal and I let it go and, understand where that person is coming from. But that's a really good example of actually creating more stress on top of stress or anxiety to kind of combat anxiety doesn't help at all. Not helpful in the least. What I needed was trust, assurance, comfort, love. You're not alone. Just like hatred doesn't cease by hatred, stress begets stress. You know what I mean? That's why making that choice will change your life. It will change your life. And it's a day-by-day choice, sometimes moment-by-moment choice. We are so heavily programmed by fear for thousands of years. We're having to undo, sift so much. But I think the invitation is very simple. What would love do in this moment? How can love guide me in this moment? Let love lead. That's it. And just observe the rest lovingly. Don't reprimand, don't judge, don't neglect, don't reject, don't get rid of. Welcome it in, listen to it, but alchemize it, transmute it through your love. And I'm going to leave by saying one last thing. For those that have said, well, how, I didn't get love. I don't feel self-love. I didn't receive love because of my childhood, because of this, that, and the other, because I've been abused, because of all of that. You can't know that you're missing something without knowing what it actually is to have it. Right? If you've never had chocolate, you don't know what missing chocolate is because you've never had it. But if you are chocolate, but you're missing chocolate, it's because you know what chocolate is. It's a really silly analogy, but just to make it very, very blunt. You know when love is missing because you are love. And because you are love, you know what the reciprocation of giving and receiving love is. So when you don't get it, your soul knows it. It really knows it. Your ego might go, well, I don't know what self-worth feels like, but your soul knows. So connect to your soul. You have to know what something is in order to know that it's missing. So let that give you faith. Let that give you courage. Let that give you strength. That if you are one of those people that feels like, well, I never got the example. I don't know. I don't know how to receive that. I don't know how to give that to myself. You do. Your human self doesn't, because you haven't had that experience embodied, reflected, and given to you in this lifetime. But your soul self knows. So connect to your soul. Connect to who you are. It's not outside of you. It's inside of you. You are love. God is love. The universe is love. Existence, consciousness is love. You cannot lose it. You can only forget it. So this time of awakening is remembering who we've always truly been and who we always truly will be forever, for infinitum, and that is love. So on that note, take it or leave it as always, as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.